awesome spring break, that it was restful and you spent a lot of time with family. Hopefully you guys are not going too stir crazy with the social distancing. But today, to kick off being back from spring break, we are going to talk about mean, median, mode, and range, okay? So you might have heard some of those words before dealing with statistics, but some of them might be new, and that's okay. We're gonna cover all 4 of them today, and then we're gonna spend the week practicing it, okay? So the first one that we're gonna talk about is mean. So what mean is basically just a fancy word for finding the average of a number. As I am, this slideshow should also be going along with your math notebook. So you wanna make sure you have your math notebook open and a pencil. If you don't have your math notebook, make sure you have it downloaded from Canvas and put into Notability, okay? But you wanna be on the mean, median, mode, and range page. It's like a full page, okay? So this is the first box on your notes page, is on mean, okay? So mean is a fancy word for average. I would probably write that word average in my math notebook, okay? So up here, there are 6 different possible math scores, okay? So we just made up 6 data points, and we're saying that 87, 91, 60, 92, 87, and 94 are our data points. Those are 6 different test scores that students might have gotten, okay? And if I want to find the average of those 6 students, that's saying if I want to figure out what they got in average, I would need to find the mean of those, okay? So to find the mean or the average of those data points, my first step is that I need to add up all the values. So step number 1 is add all the values. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to add up 87 plus 91 plus 60 plus 92 plus 87 plus 94. You would be able to go ahead and type that into a calculator, okay? So you don't have to do it in your head or off to the side. You'd be able to use a calculator for this. But once you find the sum of those, we would say the sum is 511. It's really important that you hit enter on your calculator before doing step number 2, because if you're thinking about our order of operations, addition is towards the bottom, right? So we want to make sure that we're hitting enter after we add up all our values and find the sum of 511, okay? Because step number 2 is once I find that sum, I'm then going to divide by the number of values. So step number 1 is adding them all up, and then step number 2 is we're going to divide this 511 by how many data points we have, which is 6. We have 6 math scores. So we're going to divide 511 by 6. So if you're typing into our calculator, you'd say 87 plus 91 plus 60 plus 92 plus 87 plus 94 equals 511. And then I would type in 511 divided by 6. Okay? Make sure you don't put that divided by 6 here, because if I put it right next to this 94 without hitting enter, it would do 94 divided by 6. Instead of doing 511 divided by 6, because division comes before addition in the order of operations. And your calculator knows that, so that means that you would get the answer wrong if you don't hit enter between those 2 steps. Okay? So you gotta add up all the values, find the sum of those values, and then divide by how many data points or values you had. Okay? So that's how you find the mean of a data set. Okay? So we said 511 divided by 6, you should get 85.17 or 85 and 1700ths. So that's an okay percentage to have. Typically percentages do round to the nearest hundredth. So we would say the mean of the test scores is 85 and 1700ths%. If it doesn't specify what you should round your answer to, I would say hundredths place is probably a good value to round to in general. So sometimes mean, the numbers look kind of nasty, so you might have to round to the nearest hundredths place, okay? One other way that I remember is how to find the mean is it's kind of mean of us teachers to ask you to add up all the values and divide it, right? That's a ton of work. So sometimes I remember that mean, how I find the mean is the most work. I have to add up all the digits and divide. How mean of us to ask you to do that, right? So that might be one other helpful way to help you remember how to find the mean. All right, moving on. So now we're going to find the median. And you'll notice that median has a D, and that D is in the middle of the word. So median is another fancy word for the middle of a data set. The most important thing about finding the median is that step number 1 is so important. So you might want to put a little star next to step number 1, because a lot of people skip that step, but it is so important to do step number 1 first. So step number 1 is that you need to put all the numbers in order from least to greatest. In order from least to greatest. So if I were to order my data sets from least to greatest, it would be 60, 87, 87, 91, 92, and 94. So I put them in order from least to greatest. And now, once they're in order from least to greatest, now I can find the true middle. If I don't put them in order from least to greatest first, I'm just finding the order of, or I'm just finding the middle of the data set that I wrote it down in. That's not truly the middle of the data. The middle of the data would be from least, if I order it from least to greatest, okay? So once we order it from least to greatest, we're gonna go ahead and we're gonna mark off the numbers on the outside. So I would start, we're gonna mark off the high and the low values until we reach the middle number or numbers. So I'm going to mark off, 94, 60. We're going to cross off each side until we get to the middle. So high, low, or low, high, whichever way you want to go. So once I cross them off from least to greatest, I'm stuck with 2 numbers in the middle. Now don't panic, okay? We don't just pick whichever one we want. We want to find the true middle between these numbers. So when I get 2 numbers in the middle, if they're the same number, great. You don't have to do anything, it's the same number. But if they're different numbers, you need to figure out, well, what number is directly between 87 and 91? What number is right in the middle of those? If you don't know it off the top of your head, what you can do is step number 3. So if there are 2 middles, you're going to add those 2 numbers together and then divide by 2. So when you're doing this, you're actually finding the mean of the 2 numbers in the middle, okay? So we're gonna add these together, 87 plus 91, and then that sum will divide by 2. So 87 plus 91 is 178. So then I would do 178 divided by 2 because there's 2 numbers, right? 87 and 91. So once I do 178 divided by 2, I would say 89 is directly between 87 and 91, okay? That's only if you don't know what number is directly in the middle. If you know what number is in the middle, don't worry about it, right? If it was 2 and 4, you would know that the number directly between the 2 is 3, right? You don't have to find the mean if you know it. But if you don't know it, and sometimes it's a decimal, I recommend that you add them together and then divide by how many numbers are, which is 2. So we would say that the median of the test scores is 89%. And remember, our answers are all percents here because test scores are percents. So our label here is percent. It won't always be percent, okay? When you're finding the mean or median, it's not always a percentage, but we're calling it a percent because we're talking about test scores. And test scores are typically percents, okay? So that's why we're using percent there. It could have been points, it could have been something else, but for right now we're using percent because we're talking about test scores. All right, so the last one we are going to talk about is mode, or sorry, there's 2 more, but the next one we're going to talk about is mode. And you'll notice that mode starts with M-O. One way to help you remember is most frequent, okay? Mode is the one that occurs the most. Mode, most. So we're gonna look at our data set. This one's probably the fastest because all we can do is we can just look at the data set and know what the mode is. It's sweet. So the number that occurs the most often or the most frequently. So we're gonna look for the number that shows up the most often. So your blank there should be most often, okay? So if I'm looking at my data set here, I just used ordering them from least to greatest. Sometimes it's nice when you group them together. It's faster to see if you have multiple. So I used them from least to greatest. You don't have to order them from least to greatest, but it is sometimes helpful. And if I'm looking here, well, which number occurs the most? 60 occurs 1 time, 87 occurs 2 times, 91 is just 1 time, 92 is just 1 time, and then 94 is 1 time. So which one occurs the most would be 87, because it occurs twice, and no other number occurs twice. So that means that 87 occurred the most out of our data set. So we would say the mode of the test scores would be 87%, because it occurred 2 times. Okay? The trickiest thing with mode is if you see that there are no numbers that occur more than 1 time. So if there is, if all of them only occurred 1 time, we would say that there is none, that the mode would be none or no mode. Okay? You don't want to say 0, so be careful. You don't want to write 0 because 0 is a data point, right? 0 is a number. So if I say the mode is 0, then you're telling me that 0 occurred the most often, okay? So be careful with the number 0, but you could write no mode or none for if all of the data points occur the same amount of times, okay? The other thing is that there could be 2 modes, there could be 3 modes, there could be multiple modes, right? If I had another 60 here, 60 and 87 would have both occurred 2 times, and that would be what we call bimodal, okay? So the prefix bi means 2, so bimodal. So if there was 3 modes, we would call it trimodal, okay? So there can be multiple modes, but if they all occur the same amount, then we would say that there is no mode. Do you see the difference there between no mode and then binomial or trimodal? Okay. Now we're going to get to the last one, which is range, okay? I like to think of the song Home, Home on the Range when I'm thinking this, but it's a different kind of range, okay? This one's talking about how far away data points are. So, to find the range, what we have to do is we have to, range is like high-low, okay? So when we are finding the range, we have to subtract the lowest number from the highest number. So if I'm looking at my data set, I would say that 94 is the highest number and 60 was the lowest number. So to find the range, I would need to do 94 minus 60, which is 34, okay? So I would say the range of my data set is 34%. So from the person that scored the highest to the person that scored the lowest, that range between those two is 34%. And I found that by using subtraction. Okay? So just to review here, mean, you have to add them all up and divide. It's mean of us to ask you to do that. Okay, another word for mean is average. Yeah? Median, you have to sort them from least to greatest, cross off until you get to the middle, and then if there's 2 numbers in the middle, you need to add them together and then divide by 2. And then mode is most often, or which one occurs the most. And range, you need to subtract the biggest number and the smallest number to get the range between the data set. Okay? So if you guys have any questions about any of this, please let me know. I know it's a lot of information. So fill in your math notebook, do the rest of the things on your to-do list for math, and then you'll be done for the day.